Because at this point, I'm about a third of the way into the book, and I'm like, wow, there's no plot. Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm gonna be honest, I ran out of ideas for YouTube, or I had ideas but none of them sparked joy, and in the wise words of Marie Kondo, discard whatever doesn't spark joy. But anyway, I didn't know what I wanted to make a video on, and then I remembered that Millie Bobby Brown was dropping her debut novel this week called 19 Steps, so I decided that I'm gonna read it so that you don't have to. I'll be pretty much explaining what happens and sharing my opinions. And if you are discovering this channel for the first time, I usually post videos on TV and film and pop culture in the format of video essays and rankings, etc. But occasionally I make something random like this. But yeah, if you like these kinds of videos, then make sure that you like this video and subscribe to this channel. So Millie Bobby Brown announced back in March that she would be releasing her debut novel, not memoir, novel, on September 12th. And when this was announced, the book was described as a historical fiction novel with a romance weaved into a World War II story. And I was like, Millie Bobby Brown, 11 from Stranger Things, wrote a romance/World War II story. Okay. I looked it up, and apparently this book is dedicated to Millie's grandmother, who told some real stories that the book is based off of, including the Bethnal Green tube accident. Although it is important to know that this book is still being marketed as fiction and merely based off of real stuff and has references to real people. So I didn't go into reading this book thinking that everything happened exactly, but I'd hoped that the book being based off of real stories would make it feel more authentic and interesting. Millie also got a ghostwriter for the book, and that is open public knowledge, and it's honestly not that surprising. Not like in an insulting, there's no way Millie Bobby Brown could ever write a book sort of a way, but more so in a how the hell would she have had the time sort of a way. The ghostwriter's name is Kathleen McGurl, and she detailed her process of writing the book in a blog post on her website, where she basically says that she would have meetings with Millie, and Millie would present research to her and workshop ideas with her, and then when she started writing the book, she would still meet with Millie to talk ideas, and then the book went through several drafts before getting to the final product. So yeah, that's the context, it's what you need to know. And so I finished the book this morning, and I have a headache from trying to consolidate my thoughts. It's not terrible, but it's not good. And I should disclaim that Millie Bobby Brown is a very talented actor. This is absolutely nothing against her. But okay, if I had a scale from Kendall and Kylie's dystopian novel to Jeanette McCurdy's memoir, which I understand is a broad scale, but hear me out, this book would be right in the middle. So to me, it's mid. And I have a theory, and I'm sure that someone else has thought of this theory because, let's be honest, none of us have ever had an original thought. But my theory is that Millie is setting this up so that she can produce and star in an adaptation of this book. I honestly pictured someone like Millie as the main character because A, it's her book, and B, the main character is an 18-year-old girl named Nellie. That's 2 letters off. So Nellie lives in the East End of London in Bethnal Green during World War II. It begins September 1942, and she lives with her family, including her mother Em, her dad Charlie, her brother George, and her sister Flo. She also lives close by to her Aunt Ruth and Uncle John, whom she's really close with. So the book opens with Nellie trying to take Flo out on a picnic, and then there's a daytime air raid, so they go to the Bethnal Tube to take shelter, and they're fine because it's only chapter 1, but it establishes the conditions that they live in and also where the title of the book comes from because it's 19 steps down the entrance steps of the tube. So they get home safely, and it's implied that Nellie doesn't come from money and that everyone in her family aside from Flo has to work in order to provide for the family, including Nellie, who works as an assistant to the mayor. I was wondering if and when the book would name drop Winston Churchill, which didn't take long because Nellie's like, I just gotta think of Winston Churchill's wise words. Never surrender. Also, Barbara and Billy are 2 siblings who are Nellie's childhood best friends. They're important characters. And I was a little taken aback by the fact that Billy was described as both like an older brother to Nellie and as a possible prospect for marriage. because those two don't go together. It goes into more detail about how Billy and Nellie have always loved each other, but for Billy it's always been not platonic. They'd flirted a bit in the past and spent a lot of time together, but ultimately neither of them have ever confessed to one another. But they ultimately want different things out of life. Like, Nellie wants to leave Bethnal Green eventually and travel the world, but Billy wants to stay there and raise a family there. So I was like, alright, how is this gonna play out? Nellie then goes to work, and then someone raises an issue about the tube's entrance steps, the 19 steps, and how it's easy for someone to slip and fall and get hurt. And so in the event that there's a lot of people coming in at once, there's a higher risk for people getting hurt. So they decide to make and submit a proposal to redo those steps. And at this point, I'm like a handful of chapters in. I'm about a fifth through the book, and I feel like I don't really know Nellie. Like, she cares about people, but that's all I really know about her, and none of the characters seem to have a lot of depth. So come another air raid, Aunt Ruth and Uncle John decide to use a Morrison shelter at home because they're old and it's hard for them to go all the way to the tube. A Morrison shelter, by the way, is an indoor steel shelter that people would have in their homes, and well, their house took a direct hit and they died. But tell me why one of the people closest to Nellie dies, and the only way to describe Nellie's reaction to this is her falling to the ground and sobbing. Like, the direct quote is, Nellie's knees buckled and she fell to the floor sobbing. I mean, as a reader, I'm not moved if that's the best way that you can describe sadness. There's legitimately no descriptive writing in this book. Like, it's all, this happened, that this character said this, and this character felt this. After the funeral, Nellie's dad decided it was time to send Flo to the countryside because the air raids were becoming more frequent, and it was normal at the time to send kids to the countryside when things were getting worse. So Nellie and her mom take Flo to the bus that's going to take her to the countryside, and then they put her on the bus, and as the bus is leaving, Nellie's mom changes her mind. And tell me why there's a more emotional description of seeing her child on the bus than there is of Nellie's reaction to her family dying. Like, there is an attempt here with something emotional. Her mother's anguish was real. It was as though her heart was being torn out of her body by that bus, the ties binding her to her youngest daughter stretching to breaking point, and if they snapped, it would be M who broke. That versus Nellie's knees buckled and she fell to the floor sobbing. Yeah, so Nellie runs after the bus to get Flo off of it, and then we're introduced to what I thought would be an enemies to lovers romance. This American airman named Ray Fleming helps Nellie out and then is like, why would you run after a bus? And Nellie's like, why don't you drink a tall glass of mind your business juice? Then the book switches to Ray's point of view where he's like, God, she's so hot, but she's so rude and mean. How could she not thank me? She's got that British bulldog spirit, which genuinely made me laugh. I understand the symbol of a British bulldog, okay? It was just funny to read his train of thought going from she's so hot to she's so mean to she's like a British bulldog. And then the chapter ends with him being like, I gotta go to the pub to get her out of my head. So the next night, Nellie, Barbara, and Billy go out in the town with their friend Amelia, and while they're out, they all make Nellie sing. And remember how I said that I pictured Millie as Nellie while reading this? My mind just kept playing that viral clip of Millie Bobby Brown singing that one line from Imagine, and now I refuse to believe that Nellie did not sing Imagine. Ooh, you may say I'm a dreamer. Anyway, of course they run into Ray Fleming, and the book kills my dream of any enemies to lovers romance because they straight up apologize to each other and then they start flirting in the cheesiest, most Wattpad way. I'm gonna find something. Ray Fleming, he held out a hand and she took it. It was a good sign, a thawing of the ice. Nellie Morris. Pleased to meet you, Nellie Morris. She blushed as she took his hand. Thank you, too, for saving my life. Don't mention it, he grinned. Actually, do mention it. Not every day I save a lady's life. How often? There was a cheeky, flirty look in her eye as she asked, how often what? Do you save ladies' lives? Ah, now, let's see. He pretended to think about it, counting on his fingers. Ahem, you're the first. She laughed, seeming pleased with this answer. It also absolutely kills me the way that Nellie is physically described here. She was naturally beautiful, yet she seemed totally unaware of the fact. Her hair was dark, her eyes wide, her mouth generous, a smear of lipstick accentuating her lips. She was slim, yet curvy. Ah yes, thank you for establishing that Nellie is the most conventionally attractive-looking white woman by today's beauty standards. But the fact that this is also from Ray's point of view, I'm not particularly fond of. There's also this one bit after they introduce themselves to each other where it's like, God, but she was pretty. And there was an odd combination of vulnerability underneath that feistiness that he liked. Liked a lot. Sir, you literally just met her. What do you mean? Like, is there anything intriguing about Nellie besides the fact that she's hot and feisty? So after about 5 more pages of that, it's pretty clear that this is not an enemies to lovers romance, nor is it really a love triangle, even though they tried to make it seem like it is, because Nellie clearly has zero interest in Billy, even though Billy is pining after her. So that chapter ends with Ray asking Nellie to go out with him another night, and then she accepts. So Barbara and Nellie go out again, this time with Ray and his friend Clayton, and Nellie and Ray are talking, and Ray talks about how he wants to travel the world and see everything, and Nellie's like, wow, we're so connected. You both just want to travel, but alright. They have a nice time, they kiss, they're a thing now. I'd honestly wish they had played more into the love triangle thing because that would have made the book more interesting. Because at this point I'm about a third of the way into the book and I'm like, wow, there's no plot. Like, so far it's a very underwhelming romantic story with war as a backdrop. This book is really no thoughts, just war. So the next morning, Nellie and the mayor found out that their proposal for the improvement of the tube steps had been rejected, and then Nellie feels worried and compelled to tell her family about it. And this part's a little confusing because her logic is that if she doesn't suggest an alternative as a shelter, or if she doesn't warn her family about the tube steps, then if something bad happened to them, it would be her fault. So Nellie lets her family know, and her family's like, cool, thanks, we'll just have to be careful going down those steps. And I know that we're leading up to the Bethnal Green tube disaster, which really did happen during World War II, but this felt like an attempt at a noble, heroic moment for Nellie that was just very underwhelming. Ray and Nellie continue to date, and my main issue with the writing here is that they say that they have gone on many dates and that they're really connecting and they have so much in common and that they told each other everything about each other, but they're not actually like really doing anything with their relationship or showing us anything meaningful about it. It's all just cheesy fluff, full of stuff like this gem. There are thousands of stars to be seen from my folks' place in Michigan, Ray said. Don't you just love that the stars I grew up looking at over Lake Michigan are the same ones that shine over London? She looked sideways at him. Now you're going to say that if we're ever apart, we can look up at the night sky and know that we're seeing the same constellations, she giggled. It's what they say in the movies anyway. Were they? Were they saying that in movies in 1942? Oh yeah, and Billy is just straight up not having a good time because he's still pining after her. And he tells Barbara, if he hurts her, I'll kill him. Nothing like some classic, good old-fashioned toxic masculinity. You know, at the very least, Billy being jealous adds some sort of seasoning to this story, and by seasoning, I mean salt and pepper. So for about 30 pages, nothing worthy of note happens besides Ray and Nellie getting engaged. But then the Bethnal Green tube disaster happens. So basically in real life, the Bethnal Green tube was used as a bomb shelter and had one narrow entrance. On March 3rd, 1943, a large number of people were trying to get through to that entrance and down those steps because of an air raid alert. In the rush to enter the station after an anti-aircraft rocket had fired nearby, the entrance became overcrowded, leading to a tragic crush. 173 people, including 62 children, had died, making it one of the deadliest civilian disasters during the war. And this had prompted safety improvements in bomb shelters, but also more awareness of crowd control measures. So what happened in the book was that Ray came in the midst of the air raid alert coincidentally, and he was there to tell Nellie that he had been moved farther away so that he wouldn't be able to see her as much, but also that they needed to put off their wedding probably. But when he arrived, his car backfired and that caused some people to panic, and then the crush happened, and Nellie's father and sister had died in it. As you might guess, the only way to describe Nellie's reaction when she found out her dad and sister died was that she fell to her knees, but this time she howled in anguish. Ray tells Nellie what happened, and as one would expect, she did not take it well. She gets angry at him. She tells him that he's responsible for the deaths of 173 people and then tells him to get out of her house. And she's not processing her grief well because she lashes out at everyone, and I mean everyone. She tells the people in her family that are still alive that they're to blame. She snaps at her boss, the mayor, who literally says back, you need to get your temper in check because you're not helping anyone here. And listen, I have empathy, okay? I know she's grieving. She's just not a well enough written character for me to extend that empathy. Especially because she yells at Billy for having asthma and therefore not being able to help as many people as he had already helped out of the crush. The story is also just super predictable because I had already known at this point that Nellie was going to find out that it wasn't actually Ray's car that caused the panic and it was actually a rocket, and lo and behold, that really happened. The Bethnal Green Council gave an official statement about how the panic happened, and they confirmed that it wasn't the car, but it was the rockets that were fired from Victoria Park that caused the panic. So Nellie sends an apology letter to Ray, and then she finds out that he died. Except he's obviously still alive because they said that they were shot down in France and then they couldn't find his parachute. And everyone knows in books and movies and stuff that if there's no body, they're still alive. Then at work, an official report of the tragedy comes back, and it seems to blame the public and also the mayor's council, even though the mayor's council isn't to blame because they had tried to get the steps improved long before the incident happened. And then Nellie is advised by this guy named Stan to convince her mom to sue the council because they're responsible for the deaths, even though they're actually not. He's like, I know your council isn't actually to blame, but your mom still deserves to get some compensation, especially because it's harder to provide for your family without your dad. So then her mom agrees to sue the council. And Nellie's Millie's logic is that in the case they'll be able to say and prove that they had tried to improve the steps, and that the outcome of the case would hopefully be that the government would end up paying for the compensation and that the council would be in the clear. But the mayor doesn't defend herself, and it's revealed soon after that she made a deal with the government that she would be the scapegoat for the incident if the government paid for all the compensation claims, and then they don't talk about it again. Meanwhile, Nellie switches up and she decides that she wants to stay in Bethnal Green and she wants a quiet, stable life with Billy, which comes out of nowhere. Like, if the tube accident caused that mindset change, that would be one thing, but it didn't really make it clear how she got to that point. And her feelings for Billy just didn't make sense because it was very clear she didn't love him and kept saying that he was like a brother to her. And she clearly still doesn't, because every time there's a nice moment between them, it's followed by a sentence that's like, I mean, it isn't as good as it was with Ray, but this is still nice. And alas, they get engaged. And then the war ends, and who shows up? Ray Fleming. And Nellie tells him that she's still gonna marry Billy. And then on their wedding day, like literally on their wedding day when they're about to get married, Billy sees Ray and Billy's just like, how could you not tell me that he was alive? And then he's like, I think you didn't tell me that he's alive because you still love him and you're clearly forcing yourself to marry me, so I'm gonna say no to you. So then Nellie gets with Ray, and that's the end of the book. There was a lot of potential for the book, I just had a handful of issues with it. Obviously, like I mentioned, the characters didn't have a lot of depth, and the romance and love triangle could have been written way better, but I think that if everything else was good, I might have still enjoyed the book. But I'm wondering if the ghostwriter's detachment from the material hindered the quality of the book, because Millie and her family presumably have a personal connection to the Bethnal Green tube accident, but it doesn't seem that way from the way this book was written. Like the fact that Nellie had a much more emotional reaction to her fiance who she hadn't known for that long dying versus like her literal family. The predictability, the fact that all the characters are static. And at the end, I just kind of wondered what the point was. Like, what is the takeaway from the story? Surely it's not the wise words of Winston Churchill to never surrender, is it? So the book was mid. Like, it was no better than okay. But you know what? Go get your bag, Millie Bobby Brown. Thank you for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. Make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe to this channel.